Well, we expected to hear dramatic testimony from the woman in the extramarital affair with suspended Attorney General Ken-Paxton, but in a very, very late development, and that we do not know much about. That testimony will now not happen. Hello, I'm Steve Eager.
Hello, everybody. I'm Heather Hayes. So Laura Olson was at the Senate chamber this morning ready to testify, but had to wait under procedural rules until this evening. Well, then, just minutes ago, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick announced that Olson is present but unavailable to testify, and that both sides in the case agree with that decision. Sounds very much like a compromise was reached to include statements from Olson without actually putting her on the stand in front of Ken Paxton's wife, Senator Angela Paxton, who is present but not a participating juror. Sean Rabb in studio now with the update on this and other developments today. Sean?
That's certainly the biggest development of this day. There were a handful of other witnesses, and among those, Drew Wicker was on the witness stand most of the day. His testimony, he was concerned about the relationship between Nate Paul and the Attorney General, and that after he was contacted by the FBI in 2020, the Office of the Attorney General, including Ken Paxton, did not want him to speak with federal agents.
And at some point you mentioned that FBI had reached out to you, and you make Ken Paxton aware of that. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Drew Wicker, Ken Paxton's personal assistant, testified about what appeared to be suspicious dealings between real estate developer Nate Paul and the Attorney General. Paxton and Paul had lunches together. Paul, he said, paid. Wicker described a handoff of a manila envelope. And when Wicker told Paxton he'd been approached by the FBI, Paxton asked why. The next day, First Assistant Brent Webster had a conversation with him.
Mr. Webster said that he understood that the FBI had reached out to me and that I should not respond.
Did he tell you why?
He said that I ran the risk of incriminating myself.
Wicker says when he spoke with Paxton again, Paxton told him he believed there was attorney-client privilege.
So he too wanted to prevent you from speaking to FBI?
It certainly seems that way, yes.
Wicker says the Attorney General's office offered an attorney for him. He opted to get his own. And Paxton presented him with promotion in October 2020 after he told him about the FBI, an offer he turned down, eventually resigning. But still received a monthly stipend from Paxton's campaign fund, which he ultimately donated back.
What made you return it?
I didn't put in the work, and I did not want any instance. I didn't want it to appear as though I might have any conflict of interest if anything like this ever came about.
Then there's the allegation that Nate Paul bribed Paxton by paying for home renovations. Wicker testified about overhearing a conversation at Paxton's home between the Attorney General and contractor Kevin Wood about countertops and kitchen cabinets with the $20,000 price tag. He said he became concerned when the contractor told him he'd have to speak with Nate about that. Wicker approached the Attorney General, worried there might be an inappropriate relationship with Nate Paul.
He stated that he appreciated me bringing his concern to him, and that he then assured me that that was in fact not the case.
Let's be clear. The guy that spent more time, and that's you, Drew, with General Paxton than anyone else during the time frame that we're here to talk about is absolutely not accusing General Paxton of doing anything wrong at all, are you?
I'm not accusing anybody of anything, no.
In cross-examination, Tony Busby showed Wicker pictures of the Paxton's kitchen in 2020 and now, suggesting no granite countertops, and records indicating Paxton himself made payment for the home renovations. Busby's questions clearly trying to cast doubt on suspicion about that and Wicker's other observations.
You don't have any actual knowledge that Nate Paul ever did anything for General Paxton other than buy a lunch, isn't that right?
That is correct.
Now, there's an important procedural note. House managers have moved to change the rules a bit with the motion that if Ken Paxton's convicted, he will automatically be banned from seeking public office again. When the trial began, the rules agreed on said if he was convicted, not being able to run for office again would require a separate vote. The Senate jurors will vote on that probably tomorrow afternoon. Steve?
All right, Sean, let's talk about the I was going to say missing witness, but she's there and not going to testify. What do you make of that? Do the prosecutors think they have enough? I mean, is that in play? You mentioned maybe Angela Paxton getting offended. Does that matter to the prosecutors? Could other senators in the room be offended that this witness is called and that votes might change? What do you think is all in play?
So there is in the law in Texas a piece of legislation about exempting a witness from testifying under Rule 804, and we've heard that rule a lot in the last couple of days. There are some reasons given why someone can't testify. Let me share that with you for being unavailable. They're declared to be unavailable if they're exempt for some reason because of the declarant's statement, because of the court ruling some sort of privilege, or because they refuse to testify despite a court order to do so, or because they say they do not remember the subject matter or a death or something like that in the family. So we don't know which part of that rule 804 applies because the lieutenant governor did not explain that more fully. What we do know is that he came out, he said both sides agreed to this, and so she is here but unavailable to testify, and there are a lot of questions that are not yet answered, that are still very open, and there may even be among some of the senators disappointment that they wanted to hear from her. Likewise, as you mentioned, Steve, there would be others who may not want to hear her testimony, certainly including Angela Paxton.
Yeah. Hey, Sean, is this going to affect the timeline then as we move through the rest of the week?
So it's not going to affect the sand in the hourglass. Okay. The House side had probably 2 hours or less remaining. The Paxton team, the respondent side, had 4 hours, maybe somewhere in that time frame. Once they're out of time, they are out of time. Dan Patrick has said there will be no additional time given to either side. So they will move through the remaining witnesses, whoever those might be, and then they'll move forward with voting on this motion that I shared with you about changing the rules so that if he's convicted, there would be automatic banning to run from public office again. And then the jurors would, get this matter and begin to deliberate, not leaving Austin until they have a verdict, acquittal or a conviction.
Oh, quick, do you think we find out why she isn't testifying? Will that eventually come out?
Well, it could come out later today, later this evening. The court certainly hasn't ended for the day, so it could come out. I promise there will be people wanting to press the presiding judge, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. And remember, Judge Lana Myers is at his side. Remember, she was a Dallas judge, and she was a justice on the appellate court. So she knows what she's doing. She understands the law, and it may be a nuance that we didn't expect, but it's in play now.
Okay. All right, Sean, thanks.
All right.
Remember, you can watch the trial streaming live on fox4news.com, Fox 4 YouTube page, Facebook page as well. And when we're not in a newscast, on Fox Local, that's our streaming channel. It's free to download, Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Android TV. No login is required.